In the absence of law and order, will human nature revert to savagery? That is a question that runs through the narrative of William Golding's 1954 novel, Lord of the Flies. After a large group of English schoolchildren are marooned on an island, the children quickly descend into an uncivilized manner. More questions arise as civility is nearly lost, hanging on by a thread by the few kids who hold tight to their morals. With each passing page, we are left to wonder, is the evil outside, or is it within us? Are we born good, or are we naturally evil? I believe man suffers from an appalling ignorance of his own nature.
Hello and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, and media. If you are new here, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. I'm Ainsley, and welcome back to any returning viewers. Big hearty welcome to my new subscribers. I hope you are enjoying yourself on this channel and that you continue to do so. I'm really excited to talk about today's subject because it was a request recommendation from a subscriber a while back, and so I'm glad that I'm finally getting around to it. And I do wish I would have done it a lot sooner, but I get in those moods, I'm like, oh, this is what I want to talk about. And so some videos definitely are a lot more planned, or something that I am like, okay, I'm gonna do this at this date. And then some are a lot more like just kind of getting the feeling of like, oh, this is when I want to do it. So I ended up rereading Lord of the Flies twice in preparation for this, once a while ago, and then I also ended up listening to the audiobook not too long ago, and I also watched the 1963 film, which is what we're going to be talking about today. If you are interested on my thoughts and a little bit about the history of the 1990 adaptation, please let me know in the comments. I'm also wondering if anybody remembers reading the book in school, because while I remember many aspects and certain aspects of the novel that really stuck out in my mind, I don't necessarily remember reading the book when I was younger. And I know some people remember watched the movie when they were at school as well, and I wonder if I did that as well, because I can't really remember. There are certain books that I do remember reading in school, but for the most part I don't remember a lot of reading in school, to be honest. I remember reading The Giver, The Outsiders, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I know there was definitely a lot more books than that, but for some reason I can't remember actually reading Lord of the Flies, though I do, before I had gone and reread it, there were aspects of the novel that still stuck out on my head, so I either must have read it, or this book is such a big part of pop culture. It's referenced a lot, it's inspired a lot of other books and movies and television series, so that could also be where those memories are coming from. But I was just wondering if you remember reading this book while you were in school. I asked my dad, and he remembered reading it when he was in the 10th grade. And I know a lot of people, I've heard it's either from 8th grade to 11th grade is typically when people tend to read it. So I'm very interested on your memories and your thoughts of Lord of the Flies, either the book by William Golding and its 1963 adaptation.
A frequently assigned reading in high school English classes, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who hasn't at least heard of Lord of the Flies. An inspiration for deep thought, even in adulthood, I refer back to the novel of young kids who quickly reverted to barbarianism when robbed of their comforts. No matter the decade, Lord of the Flies remains relevant. With themes of human nature and social status, the book endures itself to audiences everywhere.
Released in 1954, William Golding got the idea after reading children's novel The Coral Island. Golding found that the book was not very realistic, and he decided that he wanted to write a book where children act like children, and children act like he thought they may act in a certain situation. With the support of his wife, Golding began writing. The book was rejected several times before Farber and Farber accepted it. They ended up editing it down, and while Golding made the changes, he was not particularly thrilled with them. After the novel's initial release, it wasn't a success. This was due to the novel's darker themes and the less optimistic view of human nature. It didn't take long, however, for the book to find success, and by 1963, the book was read in schools. The same year, the first film adaptation was released, having been filmed 2 years before in 1961. At the start of the novel, the kids were supposed to be shown evacuating in their home in England. That was taken out of William Golden's initial manuscript and had them start on the island, which I personally think was a good idea. I think it worked very well with at the end result, and it showed these children in an unnatural habitat. There are several scenes in the novel that were cut that featured the mysterious character of Simon, and the final result made the character that much more mysterious and left more room for interpretation. Like the novel, the 1963 adaptation maintains its dark themes and asks difficult questions. It presents us with the children's dilemma as they are forced to fend for themselves. William Golding was an English teacher at a boarding school in England, and it's likely that he used his experiences there as inspiration for the children. While it doesn't explicitly state the class that the children are a part of, the fact that they go to various different boarding schools. You've got one that they go to like a choir school, and the way that they're talking and kind of carrying themselves at the beginning, that lets us know that these characters are upper middle class or above. These kids grew up in far more affluent neighborhoods and a more affluent lifestyle than your working class kid, which is what the character of Piggy is believed to be. In the film, he doesn't talk very differently than the other kids, but in the novel, the way that he speaks is a lot more reminiscent of somebody who's working class as opposed to his more affluent peers. I think that also allows many of us to relate to Piggy, and our relation to Piggy isn't always a positive, considering the reaction that some people have had to Piggy. I would wager to guess that Piggy is actually the child of a teacher at the school, or he may have gotten a scholarship to attend. He's very pragmatic and rational, and I would think that a working class kid would find the adjustments to being on the island a lot easier, at least for the time being when he first gets there, and he's adjusting and trying to be a lot more practical about the situation, and a lot more practical than his peers are being. And his reaction to it is unlike any of the other kids, but especially Jack and Roger, who I would say probably both grew up with the most amount of privilege, or at least were raised to have a very different mindset. Like in the novel, we are introduced to Piggy and Ralph at the beginning. They are the first kids to be introduced to us, and we quickly learn that no adults have survived the crash. The beginning of the film shows still images of schoolboys and other photos as music plays and the credits roll. They end along with the sound of a crash. Outside of this, we never see the plane they must have been on. Both in the novel and its adaptation, the war itself is not mentioned, and neither is anything outside their current predicament. It is guessed that the novel and film are set at a time in which the book was written, but it's kind of hard to say, and it's also important to note that the time in which the movie was made versus the time in which the book was written may change the way certain themes are perceived, or just the general execution in which the themes are written and just the overall execution. One of the best aspects of Lord of the Flies, and one of the reasons why I think it's a popular subject in schools, and it's something that people both in school and elsewhere have really enjoyed talking about and analyzing, and it's definitely been analyzed to death, so I don't think I'm really bringing too much to the table, but I do enjoy talking about it, and I love hearing other people's thoughts on it and their personal perceptions of the work. This is a book that's meant to be analyzed, and it can be analyzed as much as you want to, so if you're like me and you love analyzing stuff and you love looking in deeper and getting to know, characters and ask the questions, why are they like that? Why are you like this? I would say that this is a book that you should read again if you have read it before, and if you haven't read it or you don't remember reading it, I highly recommend reading it. It's an interesting book, and it's quite a bit darker than the film if you've seen the movie but you haven't read the book. It is a lot more gruesome, gory, all of that. Everything in Lord of the Flies means something. All of the characters represent ideals and hidden truths. These boys either represent the good in all of us or the evil within us. From Piggy's good nature to Roger's innate evil, the boys of Lord of the Flies are more than the faces of the story. They are the soul of the book, and in the case of some, the lack thereof. Piggy is introduced as an inquisitive boy with glasses and asthma. When he introduces himself to Ralph, he mentions not wanting to be called what the boys called him at school. Ralph does anyway, and when they come in contact with the other children, he introduces him as Piggy, and that's what he's known for the rest of the story, and even we as an audience never get to know his real name. We know him as they did, a young bully boy with glasses, asthma, and no name other than Piggy. There are kids in school that read the novel and they didn't like the character of Piggy, though I myself sympathized with him as the outsider in more ways than one. He's the character that could be the kid's saving grace and the one they ignore. It's possible that as a kid, people look at Piggy as an annoying stick in the mud. He's not one to break rules, and he likes the structure that kids often take for granted. It's not until adulthood that we truly understand who Piggy is and what he represents. Piggy is logic, structure, intelligence, and civilization, things that we tend to shy away from and lack understanding of at a young age. Ralph is the film's main protagonist, an imperfect leader whose indecisive nature is his greatest weakness. Like Piggy, he believes in structure and is appointed leader of the boys. Despite ignoring Piggy's wishes to not be called that, Ralph is the only one that listens to his ideas. As everything around him falls apart, Ralph struggles to gain his footing. Like Piggy, Ralph represents civilization. He also represents democracy and order. With conch in hand, Ralph looks to be the leader of the boys, but is soon thwarted by the growing discomfort of some and the lack of decorum from the others. As they fall into madness, Ralph is a leader without a group to lead, and the only person who sticks by him is Piggy. Rude and quick to violence, Jack is the leader of the choir boys. He is the main antagonist and he loses to Ralph to lead the boys, but after leaving the group, he becomes increasingly unstable. He gives into his primal instincts as he leaves the group behind. He is representative of innate savagery within all of us. Prior to the crashing on the island, Jack is a bully. We can tell that right off the bat, particularly in his reaction to the name of Piggy and just his overall treatment of the rest of the characters. His leadership is based more on control, and the slip of the mask is caused by the loss of what keeps him from going further. No more parents and normal rules turns Jack into everything he already was, but worse. The blood and mud that Jack paints on himself shows us what he's been hiding, an evil nature that goes beyond that of a school bully. The characters of Jack and Roger are very reminiscent of what it might be like if all of a sudden there's no laws, no rules, you aren't going by any type of, maybe if religion is something that keeps you in check, you're not going by any of that. You tend to lack the empathy that tells you I shouldn't treat people like shit. And so it seems as if Jack and Roger are the ones that are very representative of what happens when our idea of civilization falls apart. And even then, I think it's more so not even like our idea of civilization, but it's also just the innate human idea to care about people. And it may not look the same for every single group, but something is lost on Jack and Roger for sure. Roger starts off the story as a shy boy who has little to say. It doesn't take long for humanity's mask to slip. Roger quickly descends into savagery as his true self begins to show. No longer the quiet boy in the background, Roger is the ultimate hunter who ends the book as a torturer and murderer. Even Jack can't compare to the lack of humanity within Roger. Jack's right-hand man, Roger is the only character to murder someone. He takes pleasure in inhumane tasks. Roger is here to show us the evil that people are capable of. He is the innate cruelty and brutality that can live inside us all. Simon is the most mysterious of the book's characters. Much of his scenes were cut from the book that alluded to his Christ-like nature. Even so, the parallel between Christ and Simon remains. His spiritual nature and connection to the island are representative of human goodness. He is in opposition to Jack. While Jack and Roger represent the darker nature of humanity, Simon represents the kindness and self-sacrifice of humanity. And it depends. I think obviously a lot can go into this book of Golding's ideas and thoughts, but I think when it comes to the character of Simon, you can kind of see this idea that for some people, kindness and self-sacrifice, these are very natural things. For Jack and Roger, the opposite is true. There's a very lack of humanity there. Simon finds the man in the tree, and when he runs to tell the others, he is ambushed by the boys who mistakenly kill him, believing him to be the beast. The sacrificial lamb, Simon has proven in death that the beast is not out there, but it is within the children themselves. Simon Surtees, who played Eric, one of the twins, said of filming the beast scene in an interview with Bridget Osborne.
We filmed it on a beach on the mainland of Puerto Rico at Aguadilla. It was getting dark and we all had to improvise. Ralph and Piggy, Sam and Eric turn up, the only ones outside Jack's group, and we all had to rush at Simon with spears. One of the crew ran off, he was so scared.
All of the resources, anything that I used, quoted, will be in the description box below. Lord of the Flies is rife with symbolism, and this is one of the reasons why it has stayed popular and is a big part of our education, because it allows readers to connect with literature and also to say, hey, everything means something. I think this book does symbolism very well, and it's one of the things that I was very excited to go through while reading it as well as writing about it. From our first meeting of the kids on the island till the very end, Lord of the Flies is rife with symbolism. The novel's characters all represent something, and the devices they use, even the island itself. They had guessed before that this was an island, clambering among the pink rocks with the sea on either side and the crystal heights of air. They had known by some instinct that the sea lay on every side, but there seemed something more fitting in leaving the last word till they stood on the top and could see a circular horizon of water. Ralph turned to the others. This belongs to us. The kids had no say about being on the island, but Ralph's quote shows that the belief that some humans can own the earth. British imperialism and European superiority gave them the idea that they could conquer the world. This led to the deaths of many civilizations and many deaths of indigenous communities. Genocides continue as the USA, England, France, and others refuse to let go of the power they hold. While the novel specifically speaks to England's superiority, the novel engages with the changing times and the existence of others with the same beliefs. If you're not particularly sure what a conch is, it is those shells that you'll find on the beach that used to have a sea urchin in them. It was what they used as their home, and then you can kind of make sounds, or people say you can hear the ocean in them. Really cool. It represents leadership and democracy.
And another thing, we can't have everybody talking at once. We'll have to have hands up, like at school. Then I'll give him the conch. I'll give the conch to the next person to speak. He can hold it when he's speaking. Conch, conch, shouted Jack. We don't need the conch anymore. We know who ought to say things. What good did Simon do speaking, or Bill, or Walter? It's time some people knew they've got to keep quiet and leave deciding things to the rest of us.
These glasses represent intelligence and civilization, like he does himself. His specs, use them as burning glasses. This is said by Jack, and having the fact that Piggy's glasses represent intelligence and civilization, these are things that Jack as a person lacks. He really has no ties to civilization, and he's not too smart, in my opinion. The fire on the island represents hope. There's another thing. We can help them to find us. If a ship comes near the island, they may not notice us, so we must make smoke on top of the mountain. The pig's head and the beast. What it means, maybe it's only us. The masks, aka the mud and the blood. For Jack and Roger, it's like putting on their real selves, and for the others, it's covering up their humanity and giving into savagery. The kids understood only too well the liberation into savagery that the concealing paint brought. As they covered themselves in the blood of pigs and the mud of the island, they could become whatever it was they needed to be. They could let go of the civilization they once knew. When they washed it off, they could be themselves again. If only it was that easy. While the masks they wore could give them a liberating sense of letting go, what they lost could never be brought back. The innocence of the children is destroyed as they follow the lead of Jack and Roger, whose humanity was always the mask. When we come to the end, we see as the sailors look upon the children, Ralph running, the look of pain and guilt on his face. The others running after him stopped in their tracks. The question is now, who will they be when they return to civilization? Lord of the Flies was released in 1963 and it was made on a shoestring budget. It was filmed in Puerto Rico and this really helped to give them this isolated vibe. The children in the film were unknowns, most of which had not acted prior to the filming of Lord of the Flies, so this was a very new experience for them. And many of them never even acted again, and this adds to the authenticity of the film. It's almost as if we're peeking into something that we shouldn't be watching, and that there was someone who was watching these kids descend into savagery. It gives it a bit of a voyeuristic feel. It also helped its audience to connect with the marooned children. The first adaptation to the novel is close to its source material, but the biggest difference is the amount of savagery that is depicted in the book versus the movie. In the book, it is far darker than we get in the movie. We don't see as much of the grotesqueness of it and as much of the torture and just the treatment that both Jack and Ralph subject to the island itself and the things that are native to the island and the children. And listening to the book and watching the movie is a lot easier to digest, but I do think the movie did a really good job at showcasing what the book spoke of. In the film version, Piggy doesn't have the stronger working class dialect that he does in the novel. This doesn't really hinder the film or character too much, but it would have been a great little detail for the movie. The character of Percival does not have much to do in either the book and film, but he is still important to the overall story of Lord of the Flies. He, alongside the older kids, he represents who they were and the childlike innocence that has been lost. I would have liked to see a little more of him in the film because even though he was not in the book to the same extent as a lot of these characters, and he's much more of a flash in the pan. Does that make no? That's not the right thing. I don't know. He's in it for a little bit, and so he kind of represents this childlike nature and the innocence and everything that comes with being a kid. Despite the film's dark nature, the movie itself feels really laid back. The small budget, short shooting schedule, and on location filming would have you believe that the film contained a lot of structure, but according to the actors on the film, that was not the case. Roger Allen, in a 2013 interview with Tamara Cunningham, we actually did a lot of what we see in the film. It was the least directed film I've ever heard of. William Golding's Lord of the Flies is one of the most important English language books of the 20th century. Its impact remains strong, and its willingness to question so-called British values is astounding. Audiences all these years later are still fascinated with the story of several schoolboys marooned on an island. The novel has inspired other books, films, and television series. While they've done their own thing and asked their own questions, they still owe a great debt to the book that was willing to show the worst of humanity and our most innocent, our children. I wanted to find some reviews of Lord of the Flies, the book, and or the movie, and I got onto Google, and I went and saw, and I think it was on Reddit, somebody had mentioned that, it's saying if you're not white or you're not English or then it's basically uplifting that as opposed in that idea of like civilization. But if anything, I've got to say, this book made me very scared of like English school children, the rich ones, because of the characters of Jack and Ralph specifically. But if anything, it talks about how fragile our humanity is and just human nature in general. And we're talking about these characters or these kids who grew up in a very affluent society, for themselves. Like, this, obviously not everybody was experiencing this in England at the time or ever, and they are a lot more privileged. They had this privilege, and then everything they had is taken from them, and so the veneer of like civility and the way that we see that is just washed away. And I think it asks a lot about our judgment of others as well. Because at the end of the day, indigenous cultures and non-Western cultures, they might not act exactly like us, but that doesn't mean they're going around and just killing people. That's not the thing to me that the book or film is saying. It is questioning a lot, and it's questioning the dark nature and the darkness of human nature. And I know that, there's this big question of people talking about, there's the big question that people have regarding nature versus nurture, and that is something that can be talked about in terms of Lord of the Flies. And you may ask the question, so how was their life like at home? But I think you have characters, specifically within the character of Jack, and how he is so comfortable with being that. And when there's no more rules, he's willing to be the worst parts of himself. So I don't think that this book in any way is trying to speak to English superiority in a way that means that is saying, oh yeah, English people, English rich people, white people are superior. It is speaking to the fact that the ideals and the British values and how it questions that and speaks to that and the darker side of humanity. And I completely say that, like, whatever your impersonal thoughts and interpretations of this novel, there is a reason behind that. So if your idea is thinking of that, there 100% is a reason for that. But just especially when the time in this book was written, it was the 50s, and there was still very much, right now there is so much more of like an American imperialism, America above everything else, but still in the 1950s, England was in a much better place, I'd say. And so the novel itself was very much speaking to the idea of English superiority and the specific British values. Um, and and kind of the way, humans might think of themselves in a superior way, and you can speak to white supremacy and English supremacy and the imperialism on that front. And then I think as time has gone on, we can all at different points see the book and hear the book in a different way and in a different light and mindset. So my initial thought is that while the book doesn't necessarily say that human nature is always dark, it does explore human nature, the darkness of it, and that some people are not. They're only beholden to rules and structure, and once that is all taken away, they'll be nuts. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch and or listen to me rant, rave, discuss, dive a little deeper into Lord of the Flies. I know this has been talked about so much, I've mentioned it already, but I'm thankful that you decided to stick around and listen to me talk about it. I would like to know your thoughts on Lord of the Flies and how you think maybe the time period at the 1950s in which it was written and the early 1960s in which the film was done, and then today, kind of how certain things might be a little different. I do think that something that is interesting from today's point of view is that kids are so attached to electronics and to the access that they have to certain things that it would be so interesting. It's an interesting how like in depending on so many other things, like what would happen here, like what do you think would happen here, and within the certain characters, of course, you see that, but I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I need to do and discuss the 1990 version, because I know that's a little bit more diverse, and that also takes place in the US and they're all like military school kids, I believe. So that's very interesting. I do have some more videos coming up. I'm sorry this one took me a little bit longer to get out than I initially wanted it to, but sometimes, you know, things happen, life happens. So I kind of gotta go with the roll. And I gotta be honest with you, as much as I like sitting here and talking to a camera, and I've gotten so much better at it, the getting everything together and then sitting down and recording myself and doing that, and then sometimes things go wrong, and so I have to fix it to get rid of it, and it can make it a little bit harder, but I do seriously enjoy doing it. I enjoy talking about things. And if you ever have any thoughts and things that you would like to see me talk about on this channel, please let me know. Any specific recommendations list, like super like specifics, like if you have like a question and then you're like, oh, I want a list and here's like a little prompt, let me know in the comments below. I can also do a what is it, those posts. I can also do one of those. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you had a great 3-day weekend for Memorial Day weekend. Hope you're having a good little like summer so far. Is it still spring? Having a good little summer, spring so far. And I just hope you have a rest of your great day, rest of your week, rest of your month, rest of your year.